Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics and Greg Terry Experience co-stream live chat, where Greg has just rolled himself out of bed, delivered his child to a school, and has said, "Okay, let's do it." And I've been up for hours recording my normal nonsense. And this is an off-the-cuff discussion because so much has been happening. As you can see from my news videos being increasingly long this week, just because geopolitically speaking, an awful lot is going on in the US and around the world to do with Ukraine. So it has required me doing a lot of talking, which I've just continued now. So Greg, thank you very much for coming on, where we will continue that discussion, but bounce ideas off each other.
You're very welcome, my friend. Always an honor to be with you, and I'll get out of bed early for you anytime.
You were up very early this morning, according to WhatsApp. So, yeah, impressive. So, what has been happening? Well, we have seen Zelensky go over to the United States to try and cozy up to some of the politicians there to try and achieve his objectives. My opinion was it was never going to work. It was kind of last throw of the dice, and that seems to have been the case. But still, I think a useful exercise and has probably made very useful connections, not least in terms of speaking to defense leaders in the defense industry in the US, which is really important. We're going on to talk about that. I guess before we are going to talk a little bit about politics, I figure, and it's worth my audience know that I am a liberal lefty, right? And so sometimes I get attacked for attacking Trump too much or not being friendly enough with Republicans. And you sit on the other side of the spectrum to me, but with some kind of nuance, I guess, in many ways. So you've got a picture of Reagan behind you. You're a Christian pastor who is very involved with, I guess, the Christian right, as you yourself has called it. So what I'm trying to say is that, hey, if we agree with each other, that's agreement across the aisle to many degrees. And we're not just like having a go at certain people because we both agree with each other. Do you see what I mean?
Oh, not only do I see what you mean, but I agree with you completely. So yes, you would be on the left. I would be on the right. I don't really want to put myself into that right-wing evangelical Trump world because I'm really not.
Yeah.
I've crossed the 50-year-old mark, and now I'm not hunting ideologies or what my grandmother said was right. I'm hunting for truth. And in the world in which we live, we find the truth working together. Sure, I'm going to have some viewpoints. You're going to have some viewpoints. There's things we believe in, things we do not believe in. But there is much more that we agree on than we disagree on, I guarantee you.
Yeah, and I just thought it's important to get out at the beginning in case we end up, or in case I end up annoying some people. It was usually the case. But I mean, I've spoken to Professor Gerdes before, and you've actually spoken with him as well. And we are, again, on completely different ends of the spectrum. If you're going to talk about, I think the kind of left-right spectrum is deeply problematic anyway. But if you are going to use that as a simplistic tool, then, and yet we've had a really good, interesting conversation. So now to get back to what has taken place in the US, what's your read on what he was realistically hoping to achieve, Zelensky, and what was achieved, and how he was greeted, so on and so forth?
Okay, so pretty simple here. It was very important. Let's back up a couple of days. We all know that Zelensky first went down to the inauguration in Argentina. And I do not know if you saw the video or not, but Jonathan, he actually had a face-to-face conversation with Viktor Orban down there. So that's step one. That's really good. A president in the middle of a war trying to stand for his nation in truth makes a run down to a presidential inauguration. For sure, he knew Orban was going to be there. That was nice.
And they were seated like two away from each other. And I don't know whether that was Millet's team or whatever going, oh, we could have an interesting little contretemps there. And they were, and they talked to each other very frankly. I mean, there's been no translation of or lip reading about what was actually said. But man, I'd like to have been a fly on that wall.
It was one thing we do know is it was direct.
Yeah.
Zelensky's eyes were piercing into that man's eyes. So
Mm.
we'll see what comes of that. So that was very important. We do not need to overlook that.
Can I add to
Secondly,
that, Greg? Sorry,
yeah,
because something else that came out of that is that there's going to be a Latin American conference that Milei has put in place to
mhm.
talk about support for Ukraine. So, so that is interesting. There's going to be some kind of meeting of heads of state, or I don't know, dignitaries or whatever in that area. You know, global South over South America. To see how they can help Ukraine or what the position is. I don't know the details, but that is certainly a very good thing to come out of that.
It is a very good thing. And I can tell you that it's very necessary because most of those countries, I do a lot of work in Ecuador, a lot of work in Mexico. I work in 38 nations. So I have a little global perspective. They hear, and when I say they, I'm talking about the general public, they hear next to nothing regarding Ukraine. In fact, many of them are not even aware the war is still going on. There's zero news. And of course, it's different worlds. So anything we can do to bring exposure to Latin America, South America, it's beautiful and it's definitely necessary. So he then jumps up to DC, and we're going to put our charades on here in the United States and play our games. However, he was warmly welcomed by Lloyd Austin, our defense minister. He had a private closed door, he being Zelensky, private closed door meeting with U.S. senators. Schumer said it was wonderful. Of course, Chuck Schumer is the leading voice on the left, and the right was kind of quiet. This morning, when the talking heads began to discuss the results of this, there's very little movement. So Zelensky met with the senators. He then met with Joe Biden. And yes, $200 million of aid drawdown coming, including HIMARS, artillery. There was a couple of other things there that was in that $200 million package. But in reality, you know, it's just a token. It's a token gift saying, go at it. We're still standing with you. Now, when you and I were talking very early this morning, it was, there's a nuance that I paid attention to. And that was 1 year ago, Zelensky heard the words from Biden, we will stand with you until the end. Now, fast forward to yesterday, and the words were, we will stand with you until we no longer can. And please, I know a lot of guys in here are not Americans and a lot of European viewers. Those words are written for President Biden. It's not him talking, okay? And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there are people that are behind all heads of states that are helping them with phraseology, with text, with speeches, and we need to really pay attention to that.
Yeah, words definitely matter, and that will not be an accidental slip or a mistake. Yeah, that's a very interesting, an important point. I'd love to talk to you very much about what you just said, but we're just being joined by someone. Do you want to introduce who we're being joined by?
Sure. Well, guys, want to welcome you. This is my partner there in Ukraine. As you can see, he's in his vehicle right now, and we work together there with our nonprofit called Napriam, which means directions. We've been friends for 25 years. And we run the front lines together. He runs it nonstop as a volunteer, supplying aid to the military, supplying aid to civilians. If we need to evacuate people, whatever we need to do, we're there to help. And so we've got Yevgen Zhenyamatsuts in here. So, Jacob, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you. Sorry for this kind of studio.
Do you know what the great thing about modern technology is? That can be a studio. You can have a car as a studio, and that's cool. And in fact, you know, this kind of ability to communicate has been so important for you Ukrainian, you know, the prosecuting a war out there. goodness me, Starlink and the ability to communicate incredible distances and under duress and in war is just amazing what technology can do. And in this case, it helps us. Thank you so much for joining us. Whereabouts are you at the moment, if I may ask?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this privilege. Sorry.
Where are you at right now?
I'm in Khmelnytsky. This is the west part of Ukraine, between Kiev and Lviv, our main city. Let's say we stay, our base.
So brilliant. And what are you up to at the moment? What are you doing with regards to
okay, I'm using this is the part of my life when I'm in my home city. I'm using all my possibilities to be with kids. So today and this moment, I got a possibility to. I mean, I'm counting these hours, so I'm practicing. I'm taking my daughter from the school.
Right. And what would you normally be doing with your work with Greg as far as your assistance to the Ukrainians on the front line or in terms of the war? Okay,
let's say average this time we do plan something or we do travel. I mean, on the way, because it's the daytime is a good time for traveling. What kind of thing we do? We communicate with guys. We taking, requesting where the most need and what kind of need it is, and then we're looking for the ways to answer. We do it online, we do it offline, we do it by calls, and then we're reaching those places, transporting and delivering it. And surely there is kind of like specific logistic facts, like sometimes we need the passwords, sometimes we need someone to meet us there, or sometimes it can be like I'm requesting special routes because the roads are blocked or destroyed, or there is a mines. So if there is like quite tough place to get in, so I'm requesting special routes, and the people we work with, they sending us like exactly route we need to go.
And what sort of aid do you give to people in Ukraine then?
For the military or civilians?
Both.
Okay, for the civilians, in the beginning, let's say from the summer, because the before the summer we were receiving people and accommodating them here in Khmelnytsky, and we did it for more than 2,500 people. We were the first people they met on that territory during evacuation, and we were helping them with restoring or getting any kind of documents. Sometimes they were without documents because they were running out from Russian invasion without anything. Sometimes without shoes, without the clothes. So we had then we were giving them accommodation. Sometimes it was a first shower during 7 days or 10 days in the dungeons. They were locked outside by Russian liberators, and so it was like first 3 months like that. Then when we're delivering it to people on the east, it was a food sets, usually about 10 kilos, not more, because 8, 10, 7 kilos per pack. Why this weight? Because practically saying sometimes grandma or the woman or old man cannot carry it, and nobody there to help. So they are somehow getting to the place we giving out, or we transporting to their places with someone local person. For the soldiers at this moment, we helping mostly to soldiers, and not much to civilians. But if it's to civilians, then it's places where the other volunteers cannot or doesn't want to go because of the risk. It's just quite too close to the front lines. Sometimes it's 1 kilometer plus about that to the line, like confront line, and surely sometimes we have to be careful with the drones over us, and we check it.
Right.
So for the militaries, tactical medicine, it's different kind of bandages, it's tourniquets, it's occlusive stickers, and the other stuff like that. And according request, at least, let's say, we connected. So and now thermals, suits, warm clothes, gloves, then power banks. It's regular request a power bank.
And now drones,
and all about the drones. It means amplifiers of signals. It means special scanners. I mean, other stuff, like what we can.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's really important to find out what is needed rather than project your own idea of what they might need and then take that and then just not necessary. But interesting. So that gives the viewers from my side, obviously your viewers, Greg, will know all about this, but it gives my viewers a kind of understanding of what you guys are doing.
Let me tag on that 30 seconds, Jonathan, and then we'll roll with you. So what you need to understand is Zhenya's Ukrainian, of course. His father was a propagandist for the Soviet Red Army. I think he was he a major? A major? Yeah, he was a major. So Zhenya has all this understanding, but I've worked in Ukraine 26 years. Zhenya's Ukrainian. We've been friends that long. So a lot of the soldiers that are on the front lines are not just soldiers. These are basically our friends, family members, doctors, nurses, you name it. This is personal. So we go through the proper channels. We have the proper permissions, the proper authorities, the proper registrations, and communicate directly with these commanders and soldiers. So when we're running aid to soldiers, it's not just those heroes that are defending Ukraine, but it is also very personal to us. And that is why Zhenya has 4 kids. I have 3 kids. I live in America, in Pennsylvania, in a beautiful town that's peaceful. And I've already run the front 5 months, and I leave January 2nd, and we'll be running it for 3 more. Why? Because it's our family, our friends, and we're standing for truth, period.
Marvelous. Well, John, very kindly, John Larkin, one of my members here, says, any chance of passing this on to Greg? And you're going for medical aid. Thanks. So thank you for that £20, John Larkin. That's really, really very generous. And I can certainly fulfill your request there.
Thank you, John.
So very kind. So I would just be interested, Yevgen or Zhenya, if you could give us an indication of what the Ukrainians are thinking at the moment. Now, I know you're just one Ukrainian and there's many more millions and they might have very different opinions to you, but just as a kind of get a handle on what Ukrainians are thinking with regard to the aid from the US and the situation in Congress at the moment. Is that being talked about a lot in Ukraine?
Oh, yes, but probably I cannot say for all Ukrainians, because to be fair enough, there is different types of Ukrainians. Let's say like this. What do I mean by that? There is people who volunteering and fighting.
Mm-hmm.
This is Ukrainians. There is volunteers who does like relatives of those, and volunteers who really experiencing it's our war. We do not separate it. And there is other part, let's say, there is, I have to say, there is kind of watchers, and it depends of who are you interested. Like the people like I'm talking with, they are completely involved. They're having much more information, and most of this information they're getting from the guys from the front lines, not from the or the central TV stations, let's say like this. And they really trust that somehow, America, United States, Great Britain, the other countries who are really staying with, will find a way to help with no, let's say, delay. I'm hoping for that. I know there is some difficulties, but I'm hoping for that because this is a principle, and I still believe that there is a great nations, and what makes the nation are great, it's a level of responsibility, and I still believe in the great nations.
I think you're right. I've come to think I've been really frustrated at the delay in Congress. Yeah, incredibly frustrated because literally time costs lives, and Ukraine has a very finite number of lives that they can commit to defending themselves, and by extension, defending us in many ways. So that annoys me, but I am hopeful that there will be an eventual, proper ending to this, as in the aid will get through at some political cost to one or both of the parties in America. But I think it will happen. It's just frustrating that it's probably going to be another, I don't know, month. It's certainly not going to be until after the new year by the looks of it. And that really irritates me, because I always think of it, first and foremost, I think in terms of morality, of what's good. So therefore, things should happen if they are the right thing to happen. So when I look at Ukraine, I have a very clear sense of a moral compass about what's going on. So if things don't happen that benefits the right side there, then I just get really morally enraged. But I do understand that it's part of a political process as well. And for other people, they don't see Ukraine as important as I do. And I guess that's the thing. So, and you can understand that there are people in America who say, right, the southern border has been this issue. It's been going on for 40 years, 50 years, whatever. It's just more important than Ukraine. And obviously for me, and I tried to explain this recently, people had a go at me. It's like, it's obvious for me as a British person sitting on the south coast of the UK that Ukraine is more important to me than the southern border in the US. So, like, it's obviously the case. Like, I don't live in Texas. It's not an issue I'm not affected by immigration into the US. I am affected by Russian disinformation and by a destabilization of the European political landscape, etc., etc. Sorry, it's a lot of me talking, but yeah.
So let me jump in here for a second, Jonathan. And I'll say this. I'm an American. Our borders are important to me. Yet, what is happening in Ukraine right now is, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but equal to or more important, because our southern border we can handle at any moment if we can come to conclusion. But we have a window of opportunity to stop Cold War II and to eliminate an evil dictator who thinks that he is Putler #2 and can run the world. That's not our problem on the southern border. We can deal with that if we could come to some agreement in the United States. We're just a nation fully divided right now, and we'll see where that goes. Secondly, in regard to every day that aid is delayed, every day that aid is delayed, whether it's from the United States, Germany, or Timbuktu, doesn't matter, is another day where civilians are killed in Ukraine. Every day. Last night, Kyiv smashed, Odessa smashed, front lines. I'm not telling you anything that's not public information, but we're not advancing anymore. And according to the ground commander of Ukraine, we're actually moving to defensive positions to save our soldiers' lives. And winter is just started.
Yeah, so my analysis of the front line would be, and most of my viewers will know this. Let's just bring up the map very quickly, if you don't mind. Sorry, Yevgeny, yeah. I'm just gonna do this. So my idea is that Russia are broadly, and this is yesterday's pin, so ignore them, but Russia are broadly going to be advancing at not a great rate, but they will be advancing in pretty much most of the front line apart from Dnipro. So Dnipro River, as far as I'm concerned, is the only place where I think Ukraine are concentrating on trying to attack, and everywhere else they have a defensive stance, although I think it's very difficult for the Ukrainians in the Dnipro to make many more advances there without, I don't know, I just think it's really difficult. Although apparently they do have more control over this area of Krinky than was previously thought. But it is difficult pretty much everywhere else. However, as I've said a number of times recently, I don't think land is that important at the moment. If as long as it's not huge amounts of land, if they lose the kilometer here, a kilometer there, a kilometer here, a kilometer there, 5 kilometers there, as long as that is costing the Russians huge amounts of troops and equipment, then that is a trade that I think Ukraine will be willing to make over the winter period. So they can reconstitute, regenerate, get all the equipment they need, and then bleed the Russians for as much as they can, say like they are doing in Avdiivka, and they have done previously in Bakhmut and Vuhledar. Then I think that don't worry too much about there being maps covered in red pins and Russian movement, as long as it's not massive and the Ukrainians can do that in a sensible kind of operational withdrawal. They just need to have the ratio of losses to the benefit of Ukraine. It's enough, and that should be okay. So sorry, that was my tuppence, my thoughts.
Excuse me, may I enter
a
minute here? What is the huge difference for Ukrainians and with the time when we talk about the time and delays? You're absolutely right about we paying these minutes and these hours. It's the lives we living lives are we paying as Ukraine by best people in the world. My personal thing, like my position, that they are best people in the world right now on the front line, and it's nothing about their character. This delay, this is what Putin wants more than anything. He needs time. He needs time, and right now he's thousands of Russian occupants are dying. We call it like a mid-storms, just to get couple places, settlements, cities, which Putin demands to do before the new year. So for him, as a dictator, it's a principal thing. He doesn't care about the price. He has millions and millions of these people.
Yeah, I think Avdiivka particularly is something that he's so we've been led to believe. Some Russian sources are saying that Avdiivka is a place where Putin has demanded that there is success, particularly in the run up to the presidential election, and after that, I don't know anything.
Avdiivka, Kupiansk.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how realistic it is that the Russians can take large swathes of land, particularly back there in that semicircle behind Avdiivka in the Kupiansk area. Sorry, I've interrupted you, Evgeny, but just to let people know that area behind Bakhmut here, where are we? Over here, so we've got. Kupiansk. I was thinking Kramatorsk.
Yeah.
Kupiansk. Yeah. So there's a lot of push for Kupiansk at the moment, Sinkivka, and that could be one of these areas where that would be really good success for them. And then Avdiivka, but I think that's more political than tactical or operational at the moment. I mean, it will be beneficial for the Russians to take Avdiivka because it gives Donetsk a breathing space. But I think they want success on the front lines so that his campaign for re-election, which will happen, will also have people saying, "Look how great Putin is," because look at the success we're having.
Yeah, but I believe that. Sorry, Greg. I believe that it will work later in other countries as well. If the country will not help in time to Ukraine, it will turn back. Sorry, because historically, it will turn back to the people who has unique possibility now, having a power in their countries to help on a world level.
What goes around comes around is what he's saying. But there's another city up there, Jonathan, when you look at your map there, that we really need to pay attention to. So, of course, Avdiivka. Now, if you go down below Avdiivka, you have Marinka. That's a very, very, very difficult situation right now. Very. Yeah, you're right there where those dots are. Now, if you go up and you go beyond Bakhmut, so you have, yes, go up past Bakhmut. There's another city up here that very few people are talking about, but it's important. It's right up a little bit more north. It's Torsk, right there, Torsk. Okay. This is another substantially sized town that Russia does want for fortification processes. You have to understand, guys, when you're looking at the map of Ukraine, and listen, Jonathan's invited to come with us, of course. Now you know Zhenya, so he'll invite you in a moment. But when you look at a map, what we see is a flat land. But in these regions, this is not flat. You have hills, you have elevations, you have rivers, you have all kind of changes here, and you have to pay attention to positions. And Torsk, nobody's talking about, but Russia on the northeast side is already made an entrance, and you see it right there into that Torsk region. So that's another place we have to pay real attention to.
Yeah, and it's just I do wonder, and it may be because I am biased with wanting Ukraine to succeed and looking at data with a particular skew or whatever, but you just think that Russia have taken this. So what of Russia in the last year, really, literally in the last year, what land has Russia substantially taken? And the answer is not a lot. And so therefore, when we look at what Russia are going to do over the next year, when their forces have been degraded. So this last year has been painful for the Russians in terms of personnel and in terms of equipment. And so therefore, we can look at, say, Konstantinivka, Druskivka, Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, and across to Siversk, and this semicircle, which they would absolutely love. That's an absolute prime bit of real estate for them to take, right? But you think how long it's taken them to not quite take Bakhmut area, and they expect to take all that. Well, so on the one hand, I'm quite worried about the Ukrainian situation, but on the other hand, I can't see Russia taking these last vast areas of land because they're in a worse situation now than they were before, and Ukraine will get better weapons. That it might not be happening as quickly as we like, but they will get longer range missiles, I'm sure, and that's where the Russians are being degraded every month. Although they are getting better drones, so maybe that's a difference. But in most equipment, they're getting degraded, and most equipment, Ukraine are getting upgraded. So that leads me to be quite positive about the outlook. So for me, the only challenge, or the main challenge for Ukraine, yes, continued support, but also mobilization and boots on the ground. I'll be really interested to see what Zhenya thinks about Ukraine's chance of getting continued people mobilized for the armed forces.
Jacob.
Yeah.
So go ahead and tell the man the truth. So just go ahead, because you brought that, Jonathan, which I agree with you, but you brought that now to the real question. It's not going to ultimately be about equipment. It's going to be about people.
Yeah.
Okay. There is some places we have some people who I will quote. He said, "We have some drones, but not enough people. But in most of places, there is no artillery shells. There is no drones. There is when we talk about artillery, for example, our equipment, especially artillery, much more accurate and more effective. The HIMARS, some HIMARS we got, helping so much, but we have no enough shells for it. And now we will get to mobilization. Now I'll get back. But now the winter, it's a critical time for Ukraine. This is a critical time for Ukraine to get help in time. And when it goes about mobilization, the war is about money. If there is no enough help to Ukraine, to the country, which is smaller, economically weaker comparing to Russia, and Russia were preparing years for this war, and Ukraine didn't. Plus, time to time, our politics were referring to Budapest Memorandum that we trusted world by giving our nuclear. So in the time they will come to help. It doesn't work. Okay, when it goes about mobilization, it really depends how we talk, but does our country will have enough finances to take care of wounded now on this war, take care of supplying army with all needed. And it's absolutely, people knows the reality. This is why sometimes, yes, weaker by character people are really afraid. Plus, we hear this situation. Maybe you doesn't like this picture, but this is a part of not everywhere, but this is a part of. We have this picture. There is soldiers who are ready to fight, but having what to fight with. And when their relatives hears it, neighbors hears it, let's say it creates pressure. Now, yes, let's say mobilization goes with better, with better attitude. I will explain it, with better plans. Now our commanders are having strategic how to make this new soldier more effective. And there is a special protocols which are just starting to use. We didn't have it like in the beginning. Yes, and mobilization goes, and we will have, but we need supply. We need to pay not with the price. We need to fight with technology, having technology. Millions of Russian soldiers and much less of Ukrainians. We need technology. This is the only way. We need the weapon, machines, artillery, aircrafts.
Yeah, and I suppose this is where it also comes down to economics, and why there's a lot of concentration on the grain corridor in the Black Sea, because Ukraine, everything's connected. So the winner of any war is the side with the deepest pockets, right? The biggest economy. And so Ukraine needs to be able to stand up on its own 2 feet, as well as having access to the economies of all these allies. In order to stand up on its own 2 feet, it needs to sell what it sells really well, which is grain, right? And agricultural produce, which means that the grain corridor is one of the most important things to allow Ukraine to raise money. And what's the money used for? Well, for operating country, operating armed forces, but it's also now about their own, Ukrainians' own indigenous manufacturing, arms manufacturing. So as someone in the comments just said, they are creating better missiles now, like the Neptune missile and so on and so forth. There's so much. And when you look at what Zelensky did, and this is what I said in my videos this morning, it's so important. And I've been saying this for weeks, that they need to be able to get their own industries working, but also appeal to other countries' industries. So if you want Americans to get on board with you, either the lawmakers, the politicians, but also the population, Ukraine is not going to do that with a moral argument anymore. That's already been made. It's been done. And if it's not going to work any further, when you park that, it's obviously the Ukrainians are the good guys, Russians are bad guys. But if that's not going to convince you, how about more jobs, more tax, tax pays for services in your local state and area. Well, if you are producing ammunition and equipment for Ukraine, and we are spending money on American soil, on American products, then that benefits you. So that's what's really important. Zelensky went to America. He spoke to all the politicians, but who else did he speak to? All the defense industry leaders to say, we need your help to invest in here, and that will also put jobs on in your states. And so this is what we are seeing now, which is people like Czechia has just said 4.7 billion euros worth of contracts that they are going to give out, licenses they're going to give out to their defense industry to support Ukraine. It's not our cupboards are bare. We're not going to give extra stuff anymore. That's done. We now need to invest, literally stimulate our economy by helping Ukraine.
And Jonathan, before we go back to Zhenya, that message is spot on, especially to the American people. But trust me, and I'm sure there are some Americans in here, especially on my stream, that is not being communicated that way to the United States citizens.
It is changing, but yeah.
It is changing, but it's very difficult to find truth right now in regard to Ukraine in the United States. And that's a fact.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's kind of frustrating because the old Reaganism, Republicanism, as someone says here, you'd think Republicans would get behind this. 30 years ago, it would have been a no-brainer. It would have been the Democrats that would have gone, well, I'm not too sure about the war. So there's this weird change that has happened.
That is 100% accurate. 1,000,000% accurate. Yes, sir.
Can I just say thanks to a few super chatters? It's the same to you. So this thanks to Matt, who has helped on both channels. So this is to my channel, but also to Greg's. He's teamed up with John Larkin there to give some stuff over. So thank you. Thank you also to Mark Bizq, who on both channels has been super generous. As my wife's family is in Ukraine, your work is immensely appreciated. That is to you.
Greg. Appreciate that, Mark. And if your wife's family needs anything, you send me a message. We'll take care of them. I promise you. I also had a message over on mine from John Larkin, said, can you please show me the King Raccoon notebook? So, Jonathan, I have logged the entire war and streamed from day one. Zhenya and I were actually live when the war, or this phase of the war, broke out, the invasion, and we've been nonstop ever since. So I've documented from day one with my notes and the live streams, but my last notebook ran out, and King Raccoon, actually one of your subscribers who found me, sent me £5 British and said, man, go buy a new notebook. So there you have it. There's the King Raccoon notebook. So.
Nice. Excellent. Nice one, King Raccoon.
Yeah.
And Mark, who I've interviewed, Mark and Elena, on, we had a chat on mine as a live stream. They're up in Canada, Canadian Ukrainians, or Ukrainian Canadians, however you want to say it. Thanks again, Jonathan, for all your hard work from Mark and Elena. So really appreciate you guys, and thanks for supporting Greg's masterful work.
Yeah, and I'm very serious, Mark. Send us a message. We take care of them, don't we, Jacob?
Yeah, for sure.
You are. So I guess. I mean, are you hopeful that America will come to your aid in the way that you've been, expecting previously, Zhenya? But also, I'd like to get your opinion on Europe, because I have this sense, and I hope it's true, but I have this sense that at least some of Europe is realizing the importance of Ukraine and is waking up to the idea that the US might not always be there. And if the US aren't there, then actually, so Olaf Scholz, I think, has started to be much more prominent as the German chancellor and is saying the right things. You've got Donald Tusk in Poland now the Polish leader saying really strong things. You've got the French ambassador, I was reporting this morning, saying, no, it's not about peace. This is war. We're not going to be doing peace on behalf of or supporting peace efforts for Ukraine. Is not the right time. So yes, there are problems in Europe, but I think there are some European nations that are standing up more strongly. What's your thoughts?
At first, I will get back to your question about the rising up tax and in Ukraine and doing more efforts here. Yes, completely agree, and I believe we will see with a big delay. I would say really late, but Ukraine transforming that, changing it from the January. We will have other situation, and yes, yes, there were. We had like I don't know, but we didn't change our economy system to the war, let's say, economy system from the
Yes.
beginning, and we have to admit it. Like I mean, this is reality, like
Yeah.
just a fact, and it's really needed, and maybe a little bit late, but I hope from January it will work much better. Why from January coming back bureaucracy, uh, and these changes coming from the 2024 from the first days. Yeah, then Ukraine and Europe and the help of European countries. The question is, who wants to have? This is two questions, two areas. I would say one. There is a countries who really want and but they believe that Ukraine are more than important for the protection from Russia. And this is like a wall, and it's better to have borders with Russia through Ukraine. And this one side, and the other side, economically, not all countries are really seems to me or the want to have Ukraine with its potential really strong country because it's a big country. I would say it may become a big player, and at this moment it's there is factors or situation which makes it weaker and more dependable from all this war may put Ukraine in a huge debt. Why? Because we want to survive. We want to survive. And if we will not be ready to pay from inside, like own sources, and the condition will be of helping will be okay. We will give it, but then you will pay later. Then Ukraine may get to the critical station.
Yeah, so in English, there's a saying: "There's no such thing as a free lunch," which means that at the end of the day, people are helping Ukraine, but it's not charity. So when I announce in the morning, like the IMF has given $900 million to Ukraine, it's not like, oh, the IMF has got a really big bank balance and they're going, oh, Ukraine, you want some money? Yeah, here it is. Yeah, go and take all this money and go and spend it because you guys are the good guys. No, they're saying, okay, we do recognize you the good guys. Here's $900 million, but you have to pay that back, and there are strings attached, and you have to have transparency, and you need to change these rules there, and we need these companies are going to come in and set up in your country to help you do some of that. And so there are strings attached to all of this, but that it's either that or you stop existing as a country. So of course Ukraine's going to take that. Britain only finished paying off debts to the US for the Second World War, something like, I don't know what it was, like 15 years ago or something. It's just incredible. But yeah, sorry, carry
on. I'm done with that. I would say this is, I will not, there is small countries like Baltic countries. There is Czech Republic, now Czechia. There is Poland. They remember Soviet Union.
Yeah.
They remember still feeling it.
Why does Hungary remember differently?
To be honest, I don't want to touch Hungary now at all. Sorry. It seems to me there is there is influence. There is some tools Russia is using there, which are for me maybe not understandable. To the completely, but it's obvious. I don't know how it's possible. The member of NATO, the member of EU, and now like works for EU or like for NATO.
Yeah, so there are obviously cultural historical differences between Hungary and many of the other nations, and those Balkan states. You could put some of those. Serbia has a lot of Russian influence still involved in the nationalist movement in Serbia. That's a bit of a worry for Ukraine. In fact, I've got this picture that someone created for me that I showed this morning in one of my videos, but I think it's worth having a look at because, sorry, no, here we go. No, wrong. I can't do the one I want.
It's there.
Yeah. That's what I wanted.
There.
Right.
Beautiful.
So it's the idea that Ukraine is surrounded by countries that are actually quite problematic for them. You've got Transnistria, you've got Serbia, you've got Hungary, you've got Slovakia now, you've got Lukashenko in Belarus, you've got obviously Russia, and elements in the rest of the other countries that are pro-Russia as well. And it's almost like this board game, this Cold War board game of like which countries support one side. It's like we've got two sides. We've got BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South America, but really China and Russia, and the Western world and NATO and the EU and Australia and Japan and South Korea. We've got these two sides, and it's this simplistic idea that actually you got to pick a side, and which side are you picking? And sadly enough, there are some countries that are so wrapped up with the Russian influence that they are picking what I would describe as the wrong side.
You see on that map there as well, the big country right in the middle of all of that is Poland. And it's appearing that the new Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, is saying the right things in regard to Ukraine. So that's refreshing.
That's really good.
But, I would even add to that map, and I know you're looking at it from the European perspective there, but if I continue to even wrap around, I go down into Turkey and I'm going, okay, where is Erdogan really at? I know he's in NATO, but
yeah,
he goes to Sochi and calls Putler one of his dearest friends in the world. And then you can come over to the conflict in Armenia and Azerbaijan, and then you can wrap right around to Iran, who supplies Russia.
Yeah.
So
and then Georgia, which is an interesting place, because on the one hand, I said this morning, the one hand, the Georgian public, I think, are very supportive of Ukraine. And you look at the highest number of casualties for non-Ukrainians in the war is Georgians, and then Belarusians, interestingly, for those that volunteered to help Ukraine. But so Georgia is an interesting one, where the politicians, or at least the Georgian Dream Party, are becoming increasingly pro-Russian, but the general public have slightly longer memories and are broadly more pro-Ukrainian. Although again, that's a simplistic view there, but it's complicated in a number of places for sure.
And your guest here from Ukraine tonight, I remind you, his father was a major responsible for propaganda in the USSR. And if I remember correctly, Jaka, you lived in Georgia as a small boy, born in Ukraine, lived in Georgia.
Yeah, till 12. I remember it very well.
Interesting. Yeah. So, it is this new Cold War 2.0 era that I honestly think we are entering again. This war has reignited old feuds and is separating, polarizing the world into two camps. And the question is, so when you look at places like the Middle East, when Putin goes and visits Saudi Arabia and UAE, you have to pay attention. That's bloody important that he's going, these are producers of oil, huge producers of oil that have OPEC candidacy. They pull a lot of strings, Saudi Arabia and UAE, and they're spending a lot of money on defense. Interestingly, Saudi Arabia spends a lot of money on UK companies on defense. But there are things going on in the world that we need to pay attention to, because I think it's falling into this new version of the Cold War. I don't want to scare people.
No, it's remember, we're hunting for truth, and that's the truth. That's where we're at. I still come back, and there may be folks that disagree with me, and that's okay. But I come back to even early moments in the war when and I'm going to mention a name here, Jonathan, so I don't know which way you go with this, but I appreciated what Boris Johnson did when he would at least come walk through the streets in Kyiv with Zelensky and be with the people, and the bombs would drop and he would hop off the train. That's the kind of leadership that, like him or not like him, he was bold with his statements, and that's the only thing that Vova Putler understands. That's the only thing.
He's not. He actually backs down from strength, and it's interesting you say that because. And I'm no fan of Boris Johnson, but I totally agree with you, and I think he did a really good job with Ukraine. In fact, he probably did that more so because he was in a lot of trouble domestically at home with politics, and here was something that he was really strong on, and people were loving him. People were making croissants of him in like Kyiv and whatnot. So yeah, he was like, right, I'm going to go all in on that, and credit to him. There's the Ukraine, the latest podcast, which is a Daily Telegraph podcast in the UK that's still going. It's the biggest podcast ever, and it's on the Ukraine war, and it's a really strong support of the of Ukraine. But they were talking yesterday. They had one of their Telegraph journalists is based in Brussels, and he was saying, I've been speaking to X, Y, and Z, and there's this sense in Europe that they need a unifier for Ukraine, rather like Boris Johnson. So at the beginning of the war, Europe came along because Boris Johnson said these things, and that gave Europe the permission to do so as well. And now we've got Rishi Sunak, who isn't very strong on stuff like that. He's a bit of a kind of schoolboy. He's not good on foreign policy. There were people in Brussels apparently saying we need Rishi Sunak to do that like Boris Johnson, but he's not the kind of guy. So then they were saying, well, perhaps this is a job for David Cameron. He was a previous prime minister. He's now the foreign secretary. Can he be a unifier? But I think there needs to be some big personality person that I don't know that Emmanuel Macron is that person. He's too divisive in France. I don't think Olaf Scholz is, the charisma is there for him. You need a charismatic person to stand up and say, I am going to fight for Ukraine and I am going to unite European leaders.
And I want to stand up and give you a standing ovation. That's the best statement we've made since we began streaming 56 minutes ago. We need leadership to stand up against Putin, because as long as people like Donald Trump will say trash like this, and I have Reagan picture back there, guys, so don't slam me. But, when I get back in the presidency, it'll take me about 24 hours and I'll give old Vladimir a call and end this war and everything will be okay. So we either have that or we have Joe Biden, who's doing what he can do, but really he's very old, very senile.
Don't mean to interrupt, but just to agree with you there, like Biden could be the person to do that I've just said, but he is too old.
Yes.
And I don't think he, like, when you listen to him speak, he says the right things, but actually he stumbles over the rhetoric quite a bit. And it's little things like that. So someone, and I know this is me interrupting again, but someone just said, Brian Ivey just rightfully said, I think the Italian PM, so Giorgia Meloni, has been inspiring. The Baltic states have been inspiring. Yeah, but there's an interesting, I don't know who I was talking to, but it might have been just on one of my videos, and reacting to this idea that, sadly enough, if you don't speak English as your first language, you are at a disadvantage to appeal to a wider world. So whenever you hear someone like Giorgia Meloni speak in public, it is a translation of what she says, and it's either subtitles or it's a voice speaking over, and that struggles to have purchase internationally. So sadly enough, and I'm not saying this because I'm English, I'm saying this because English is the international language. If you need a unifier, it really helps if that person speaks English as their first language. And that's just a sad truth of it. And I had this realization recently. So whoever that, it would be great if it was a really, young and upcoming strong American leader or British leader or someone that's got a great command of English. But I don't see any of those people around at the moment. Sorry, I did interrupt.
No, Jacob, what's your thoughts on that? The English.
I would give my thoughts about leaders. This is, we have saying in Ukraine, holy place cannot be empty for long. Which means where there is no leadership, the other opposite, someone will take this place. This is what we have in the world at this moment.
Yes.
So like we so many, I mean, I'm not a professional, just simple person, but seems to me Russia bought countries, made them dependable, made them, I mean, put them under the pressure, took their freedom, economical freedom, I don't know, different kind of freedom. And now not so much leaders are standing up and say, okay, I have to admit and say it, we depend on Russia. Not much are saying that. And this is why 600 billions a year Russia gets a year from who? From not straight, but like opponents or enemies. Why? We still have it. So who is paying for this war? European countries.
Well, the U.S. House just voted yesterday to ban the imports of Russian uranium.
Yeah.
The United States imports 12% of all Russian uranium through 2022. So they put a bill to stop that, but they've been paying it up till now. And now it has to go to the Senate.
And European hydrocarbons, we're paying for oil and LNG still. But the problem is you can't just turn off things like that.
Agreed.
Because then suddenly you don't have energy, right? So
you have a vacuum.
This is difficult. It's really easy. I've said this a number of times. It's really easy for me to go, I can't believe Spain and Belgium are still importing all this LNG from Russia. But you've got to get it from somewhere, or it's a slow transformation of changing your energy makeup. And so it is difficult. But it's moves like that that are so important that hopefully disallow Russia to keep getting this income in. It's so frustrating to be collectively fighting against Russia, saying, right, here's some weapons to blow you up, and here's some money for you, Russia, so that you can stop those weapons from blowing you up. It's like, what's the point?
Yeah, this is the society average we have. The society, of comfort. When it says, okay, we cannot load, it's everywhere. My opinion, everywhere. We cannot make any percent, of the fee, or we cannot pay a little bit more for the gas because it's not good for us. Let's buy it from Russia. But I did stop on the leaders who at least could admit it and say, okay, this is why we need new leaders who will be ready to get this new challenge and be quiet and lead. And
then you have the other problem is that when you have these democratic elections to elect new strong leaders, that Russia are meddling in those elections. So that Russia are meddling in the British elections, in the French elections, in the German elections, in the American elections. We know the disinformation is rife in the Baltics. It's just such a challenge. And it's not to talk about Serbia, not to talk about Slovakian elections that just took place where Russia is massively involved. It is this fight that we're having not only on the battlefields of Bakhmut and Avdiivka, but the battlefields of our minds over the Russian influence of the narratives. And it's just, I think it's this realization that this is the new era we're in, to return to the Cold War 2.0, that we are all fighting this, whether you realize it or not. We're in this war.
Yeah,
you remember it was Putin and Xi Jinping just a few months ago talking about the New World Order. And I don't want to take it down a conspiracy rabbit hole, but basically an adjustment from the world of the West to the world of the East and our standards. So we're right there.
But that's the point of BRICS. I mean, that's the whole point of Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, where they've also offered Saudi Arabia, a number of other nations. I don't know if UAE's in on that, and a number of these other, Iran maybe. You're like, this is an axis of evil, or like a group of people that are super, super important, and they are trying to move they don't want the dollar to be the international currency. They don't want America, the US, to be the head of the global hegemony, the global supreme power. They want an alternative. And you've got to understand, American the American public, for example, need to understand that that is what's going on. Now, there might be domestic issues going on in America over here, but you can walk and chew gum. You can think about two different things. You can sort out those domestic issues while understanding that there is a massive challenge geopolitically to the US, to the West, that is going on here. And I don't want to be a full-on, oh, the West is great and isn't the West awesome? That's not who I've been all my life. But there is definitely an existential challenge to our way of life that is being fought at the moment in Ukraine. But don't think for a moment it's not being fought virtually elsewhere, and it won't go beyond Ukraine if Ukraine don't prevail.
I would say it this way, in agreement with you. This is a war. And I saw somebody's comment in your chat there that says, unfortunately, this isn't a Cold War right now. This is a hot war.
Yeah. Sorry. Very good point.
Very good point there. Fifi. And it's a war of values. It's a war of civilization. It's a war between the past and the future. That these are the things that we're facing, and we have to face them together. Yes, Putin invaded Ukraine, but folks, if the world is that narrow-minded to think that this is just a regional conflict over Novorossiya or an ethnic language, you're clueless. This is exactly what Putin has been preparing for decades. This did not start in February of 2022. This started even back in the 90s as a preparation, the transition to Putin, the transition to the leadership that's now in place. It's been happening for decades. And unfortunately, the world's struggling to catch up to that understanding. It's reality.
The other thing I would just say, in terms of elections in our own home countries, wherever you guys are around the world, viewers, is that just be warned, and this is not to say that these issues aren't important on their own, but whatever divisive issue you have in your country, whatever that might be, whatever disagreement you see in the papers or amongst your politicians, that will be hijacked by Russia. And they will hijack issues that aren't actually too important, but you might think are important. Culture wars issues, those things that we all love to argue about down the pub or with our friends over a cup or whatever. These may be things that we argue about, but they often aren't very politically important. But you will be told that they are politically important by the trolls and the bots that are interfering with how we do our politics. And so just be warned that when you are being sold this idea that these are big problems, just be worried about what's going on over there. Right? Don't look at these shiny things that are distracting you, because over there the Russians are undermining your democracy. So that's just, that's my soapbox. I get off it. I don't know what more that I know. My boys have just got back early from school, so I'm going to have to shoot off in a little while.
We're good. I think this was fantastic. I hope that your guys, I know my guys on my channel, Zhenya's with me constantly. I hope it was helpful, Jonathan, for you, and being able to talk to Zhenya there live, and his English is wonderful and great insight. Now,
I'm sorry I did too much talking,
no, we'll do it again. We'll do it again with Zhenya, no problem.
Please do.
But Zhenya,
yeah,
you need to give the man an invitation. Tell him we'll take care of him.
Oh, you invited officially. You invited. If you want to take a picture, and chat with your people, showing the truth from Kherson, we will help you, and the other places. But I want to use this chance to say and to thank all the people in the world for helping my countries, helping my friends, helping our soldiers, our people, all the ways you can. By some people accommodated and receive them in the countries, but the ones who sharing the truth, which is now it's so important, sharing truth, because Russia seems to me has control, and they're everywhere, their contacts everywhere. this is why, by some reason, Putin saying, being being aggressor, being quoting Nazis. He says Ukraine are fascist. Why? They are fighting. They killing our people. Not editing because we are raping Ukrainian women. We killing Ukrainian kids. But why they are not happy? We send our occupants there. Why they're there? And when you share the truth, it's everywhere. We need to share the truth. And if the one thing, I don't know why the control of media is so weak at this moment, but if we would have the biggest company here in Ukraine just showing every day, not in the same time live, but every day what's going on here, just with no comments, the feedbacks of people, how attitude of people in Kherson, on deliberated places, which our guys took back, like Kherson, for example, their attitude, probably the situation maybe would change. But at this moment, I want to thank everyone who support anyway my country. Thank you.
And I think, do you know what? When you think about the outpouring of love and support for Ukraine over the 2 years, and you think of Russia and how much there hasn't been an outpouring of love and support, how much fundraising of international people done for Russia in terms of drones, like how or humanitarian aid or whatever. You understand who the good guys are in this, and I know I often talk about good guys and bad guys, and it's way too simplistic, and it normally is way too simplistic. But my opinion is a closed door now. It is pretty bloody obvious that the good guys are the Ukrainians and the bad guys are Putin's Russia. And I'm sorry to be that simplistic, but you only have to look at all of the evidence to understand that that's correct, in my opinion.
Jacob, thank you. Jonathan, let me just sign off here as well. Thank you to all of your viewers. A lot of guys in there sending wonderful comments in the chat. Now, the good thing about Jonathan and I, we're on different sides of the world. So Zhenya's with me quite often, and it's 9 o'clock Eastern Standard. So if you're up in the middle of the night over there in Europe, hop in and say hi. And we're just working together for the truth. Now, way early in the stream, Zhenya, there was somebody in the chat that asked that you would pronounce the Ukrainian currency name properly.
Hryvnia.
There you go, guys.
Hryvnia. It's that easy.
Hryvnia.
Do it again.
Hryvnia.
Hryvnia.
Woo!
Hryvnia.
Hryvnia. Slava Ukraine.
Can I just give a thanks to Brian Ivy, obviously to Mark Bizq and Matt Bishop and John Larkin, who had already said thanks to Brian there.
Thank you to everybody.
Thanks to, and I don't know who this is to, but thanks so much to Matt Bishop again, who's gifted 5 memberships. He says, I have a couple of ex-military 4x4 vehicles that I bought for an overland trip. How interesting. Like, I just got a couple of 4x4s. I feel they would be better off being used by Ukraine and don't know how to get them there. Wow, goodness, I don't know. Maybe
hold on.
Hold
that comment down. You see the thumb up. We know how to get them there.
Yeah, right. We know, and we can do it like personally from there to the
front,
most needed, most hard place.
So, Matt, you know who to talk to.
Yes,
Michael,
out through Jonathan or us, whatever.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. I love your work, Jonathan. Hi to the guests, Slava Ukraini. Thank you, Michael. Kia kaha, brother. Kia kaha, bro. That's my New Zealand accent, by the way. Tonna Otterson has gifted a membership. Thanks, Tonna. He's a great supporter. And also, finally, Paul Gilbert, again, thank you. Keep it up, Jonathan, Greg, and Yevgen. Love the constructive conversation, Slava Ukraini. Thank you, Paul, as super appreciated. But as ever, Mark Bizq, Matt Bishop, and John Larkin too. Thank you, everyone. Last words, I think, should probably go to Yevgen, to be honest. What do you have to say, buddy?
Thank you.
There you have it.
That is a perfect way to end. Anyway, thanks everybody. Stay on the line, guys, in the green room.
Yeah.
But as to the viewers, I really appreciate all your support, both for myself and obviously for Greg Terry too. You know where to reach him if you need him or want to support all the amazing work that he does. And we will definitely be speaking. Hopefully all three of us will be speaking again. Take care, everybody, and Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
Героям слава.